Happy Friday, everyone. Isn't Friday a little bit more exciting than the rest of the days of the week? You get to look forward to the weekend. I will say, I think I've said this already, but if I were really smart, I'd save the boring stuff for today because the excitement would balance out to like the lecture. But I really like doing the fun stuff on Fridays, and so I don't know. Maybe that's just double dipping. Who knows? We got some discussed stuff to talk about real quick, some items to discuss. So let's go ahead and do that. First and foremost, the Career Expo was yesterday. Hopefully you went. If you are relying on that for your, if you're relying on that for your extra credit for this course, please make sure you send me an email to let me know that you went. I can't verify otherwise. And most of the people I think went to meet the firms, but I do want to get the opportunity for those who did the extra credit opportunity through the Career Expo. Also, just as a reminder, if you're interested in lunch with the Spire Energy representatives, it's going to be a week from Monday. Please let me know. It's going to be immediately right after this class. We're gonna pack up and we're gonna go meet the representatives over the student union and enjoy one of the vast repests that the student union has to offer. With me, it's probably going to be Chick-fil-A because that's what I always get whenever I go to the student union. And then I do want to talk very briefly about what we're going to be doing over next week. So next week, we're going to be doing our final chapter before the test. We are going to do homework on Wednesday. It's going to be a very short Wednesday class. Then Friday, a week from today, we will have our exam review. And so the exam reviews, I do pretty much the same thing for both my undergraduate courses, is that we spend an entire day talking about the exam and preparing for the exam. Part of that is going through the study guide. If you've looked at the study guide, it is massive. All right. That's by intention. I want to make sure that you have a comprehensive view of everything that's possible on the exam. I will not go over every single detail of the study guide. So your first task before Friday is to read through the study guide, and if there's something that you need clarification on or you need detail on, you should come making a note of that so you can ask a question about that in class. The second part of the class, we will go through the practice exam. I will go through the practice exam pretty quickly, but I will go through it thoroughly. I would expect everybody in this room to complete the practice exam before coming to class on Friday. Now, why do I ask that? The whole goal of the practice exam is to give you some idea of where it is that you have your strengths and where it is you might have weaknesses. If you come in and you answered, you know, most of the questions correctly, if you would have scored a 90% on the practice exam, if you'd taken a rote, then you should feel pretty good about where you stand for your preparation for the actual exam. If you come in and all the stuff that related to chapter 7 you got wrong, that's probably a good place where you need to focus on. You need to focus on the content. So please complete the exam in advance. There will be a key available on Brightspace. It's posted to Brightspace now, but it's not available until class starts on Friday. So please try to do this as to the best of your ability on your own, because again, the whole goal is to gauge so you can use that as focus for your studying over next weekend. And then next Monday, right before we go to lunch, I'm doing the lunch. That will be the exam, and it'll be 50 minutes. It's 20 multiple choice questions and then 2 problems. Historically speaking, most people have not had trouble finishing in 50 minutes, but I do recommend that you come prepared. So yeah, and I'll give you more insight about that, but feel free to reach out if you have any questions about the exam. I think I provide as much detail as I possibly can provide, but I'm more than happy to provide any more detail that needs necessary. All right, today we're going to talk about some varied functions. We're going to have 2 categories of functions. They're not going to be at all related to one another, but that's just kind of the way that I set this up to discuss for this Excel discussion. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at this first tab. Now, the first part we're going to talk about should be pretty intuitive. I think that everybody should be fairly familiar with how to do sorting. Interestingly enough, sorting is probably the function that I use most, or the feature of Excel that I use most frequently out of anything. I never thought that would be the case. I would not think that sorting would be the most applicable. But we're talking about why, because there's a few different features of sorting that I think are relevant. So as you see here, I've got student names, and we talked about the nature of student names. By the way, this used to be actual student names in the class, and then about 2 years ago, I had a small incident where I put student names with fake email addresses on a screen, and YouTube censored the video for cyberbullying. Okay, and that's become a running joke over the time. It's like I try not to put student names on videos, and if they accidentally pop up, it's like, oh, I'm a cyberbully again. Which obviously cyberbullying is very, very serious, but it's kind of ironic that it's taken to the extreme that if I use fake names and fake email addresses, they say, okay, this can't go on YouTube. All right. So These are actually not named. They're real. These I took popular first names and combined them with popular last names at random, and these are the names that we came up with. So nobody in this class, at least not yet. I don't think there are any common names in this class. It would just be a coincidence if somebody was named Mason Anderson in this class. We got a Mason, but we don't have a Mason Anderson, so I'm safe. Well, uh, we talked about the combination of this name. Let's say I need to split this out. There's a few ways that I could approach splitting this out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and insert a couple of columns over here to the right. And this is just highlighting on column B and then clicking right click insert is all I'm going to do. This is a pretty easy task, but I'm just going to copy this information right here, student name, and put it here. And I'm going to delete student name because I don't want to use that. So let's say I want to split this out. The easiest way to go about this, and by the way, this will only work if it's first name, last name. If you got first name with some people have initials or first name with multiple names, it won't work. But for our purposes, this will be fine. Let's just go ahead and do a quick text to column split. So we're going to go to data and we're going to say text to columns. Now, text to columns is wonderful. It's one of those ways that you can take disaggregated data that's in the same field and you can split it out into multiple fields. I personally prefer when it's fixed width or it's got a specific delimiter, but you can use the space as a delimiter in certain situations. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to use delimited. We're going to click next, and we're going to default off tab, and we're going to use space. And you'll notice that a space or a bar should appear in our data now. So yeah, and that's basically how we're setting this up. Not too difficult, not too challenging. So let's go ahead and go to finish. And now we split out our names. Let's just go ahead and validate these. We're just going to say first name, last name. So now this gives us a few more options if I want to sort, because it's currently sorted by last name. But the interesting thing about the way things were set up is that I couldn't actually resort this by last name because the first name would have taken precedence. But by splitting this out into last name, I can sort according to first name and last name now. So let's say I'm going to go ahead and sort everything, and I'm going to do it by the last name. I can do that. All right. Or if I want to do it by first name, I can do that. And by the way, I sped through that, so I'll back up and show you exactly what I did. So I highlighted the range, went to data, which we should still be in data, clicked on sort, and it actually recognized that my data had headers automatically. Sometimes it won't do that. You'll have to click on that, but it did recognize. So I'm going to sort by last name or first name, whichever the precedent is. In this case, I'm just going to stick with last name. And that's not going to change your order, but that's the deal. There is another way that we can actually do sorting as well as other extraneous tasks. And this one's one that I learned fairly late in my Excel learning. I should say that I didn't learn this in college, which is weird, but I learned about the auto filter. So if you look next to sort, there's this thing that looks like a funnel right over here. It's called the filter. Go ahead and click on that. And what the filter does is it adds automatic filter options to the top row of your data. So say that I want to sort by first name, I can go ahead and click here, and I can sort A to Z or Z to A. Another couple options that I have is I could actually, if I wanted to select only certain pieces of data, like I want to select everybody with a first name beginning letter A, I can identify that. So the auto filter can be very useful. But again, these are things that I think that you probably had some exposure to back in 153. All right. Let's talk about something that you probably talked about in 153, but really didn't see any practical usage for. Let's say that I want to randomize my list of students. Like I don't want to, not haphazard. I want to truly randomize this. This is something that comes up relevant to this course. Does anybody notice that I kind of call it students at random? I actually create a list at the beginning of the semester. I say I'm going to randomize the students, and I'm going to call on them so I wouldn't know who's going to be first, who's going to be last when I call on. That's the list that I call out when I talk to you at the beginning of the semester. How do I do that? Well, it's going to be using something called the RAND function, R-A-N-D. And the RAND function is unique in the fact that it has no parameters. You do have to add parentheses. I think this is just because that's required according to the Visual Basic backcode, but we don't actually put any parameters in there. Now, we can add parameters and we can add multipliers here, So we could actually manipulate this, but the rand function itself is just equals rand, open parenthesis, close parenthesis. And when we do that, it will do a value between 0 and 1 listed here. Now, there's a few things that are interesting about the rand function. First of all, now that I have a random seed, I've got a basis on which I can randomize my data. All I can do is I can just need to go over to sort this column. I'm going to sort smallest to largest, and it's going to give me a random list of student names. What's more fascinating about random function is that random function reseeds every single time you perform an operation. So if you sort it according to smallest to largest, you will notice that it's no longer smallest to largest anymore. Because when we did that sort, immediately once the sort took place, it created a new random seed for everything that had the rand function in it. Now, could that be potentially useful? Let's say you wanted to randomize multiple times. So I could just go ahead and do the same thing. I could take off the random seed, and then I say, all right, sort smallest to largest. Continue doing that, just resorting smallest to largest. Now, the random function by itself is pretty useful. There's some variants of the random function that can be very helpful as well. So one thing that you could do, let's just go ahead, we'll delete that data here. Let's say that I want to have, instead of a value that's going to be between 0 and 1, I want a value between 0 and 100. It doesn't matter how many decimal places it is. I can use mathematical operations to do that. I could just multiply it times 100. So we can add multipliers here if we want to come up with a true random list of numbers. But let's say you're being very specific. You want to have a value, a value to 0 decimal places. You want to have those whole numbers between 0 and 100. How would you do that? That's a variant of the rand function called rand between. And this one does have parameters in it. So it basically says, what is your bottom value? What is your top value? So I'm going to say 1 to 100. And it will return a random number in between those values. Random whole number, I should specify. Now, it's important to note, the one big drawback of the rand between function, the big advantage is that it produces whole numbers. The big drawback is that it doesn't prevent duplication. So it's possible that I could have multiple people with the value 35 in the list. So if I don't want to have duplicates, you have to be very, very careful about that. The rand function by itself is much less likely to provide duplicates simply because there's an infinite number of values between 0 and 1. So that's something to consider if you're using those functions. All right. So yeah, some ways to methods to sort that I think can be very beneficial and very useful that are not necessarily intuitive. All right, moving on, time value of money. Does anybody do any financial planning tasks on their own? This is something that I think that you become acquainted to, but most people at your age, the financial planning work that you only do is usually academic related. I am a big advocate for financial planning very early on. I will tell you, had I done this, had taken my advice when I was in my 20s, I would probably be looking at retirement within a couple of years now, as opposed to looking at it within the next decade. All right. That's one of those things that you learn very early, is that the longer that you can invest money, the more money that you'll gain. And I've actually had to weather multiple crises, like the global financial crisis of 2008 and COVID crash of 2020. And all those are kind of been items that have been relevant in my financial future. But learning how to actually use Excel in this vein about how to actually perform financial planning tasks can be very helpful. And it goes back to some things you've learned in probably your prior courses called time value of money. We all know that time value of money tells us that the value of $1 now is worth less than it will be in the future, or value of $1 is worth more than it will be in the future. Now, that's a little bit more, a little bit of a challenge. Basically, we're saying right now is that $1, if you consider what the escalation in value will be, is that $1 in the future is not as valuable as $1 now, because $1 now can gain value. Conversely, $1 in the future is worth less than $1 now. And that's kind of what we all know about the features of time value of money. The great part about Excel is that the time value of money calculations that you had to do back in 220, remember those tables back in 221, those tables you had to use in 221 to do those calculations? We can bypass those and we can do all of these tasks in Excel much more quickly. So I've got a few examples here, and what I'd like for you to do is I'd like for you to follow along and learning the functions. If you already know the functions, great. If you don't know the functions, then we're going to learn about them. So you want to put enough into an investment account today, have $100,000 in 10 years. Wouldn't that be great? Have 100 grand in 10 years from now? Just having 100 grand just sounds good in general. All right. Assuming that you can generate a 7% rate of return compounded annually, how much would you need to invest? Now, there's some terms here that I want to make sure. Does everybody know what I was talking about when I say compounding? I'm sure I'm pretty I'm assuming that most everybody has got this idea of compounding down, that you've encountered that before. We're just going to do a very simple assumption of compounded annually. So how much do we need to invest now? What are we calculating here? What is the technical term for what we're trying to calculate? So it's present value. It's called present value. And there's actually a function for present value in Excel. It's PV. So we're going to do equals PV. And once we type that in, it gives us the inputs, which this is one of those things that's very helpful to have the inputs for the calculation. So we know the rate, it's 7%, which you can type in 7%, or you can type in 0.07. Either one of those is fine. Number of periods, we're doing this on an annual basis, so we're just going to type in 10. Now the payment, this is not a payment metric. We are going to deal with payments here shortly, but for right now, we're not making payments. We're saying we're going to make a lump sum investment right now, and we're going to receive $100,000 in the future. So the payment is 0. The last one we do need to input is future value, because we have to specify what it is that we want in the future. This is a little bit confusing about why I do this. So technically speaking, Excel wants to recognize cash outflows as negative numbers and cash inflows as positive numbers. And I say that technically speaking should be the correct approach. I have a personal preference for all my values for these functions to come out as positive numbers, which means that I have to put my inputs in as negative numbers. So I'm going to type in negative 100,000. And the only reason I add a negative sign here is to say that I want to return a value that's positive on my value. Now, students always ask, do we need to put the negative sign here? Could we put it at the beginning of the equation? Either one is fine. I tend to put it on the number, but either one is fine. So basically it's saying we need to invest $50,834.93 now at 7% return compounded annually to get $100,000 10 years from now. By the way, do I have any savvy investors here who've heard of the rule of 70? Has anybody heard that term before? This was kind of intentionally used here. So rule of 70 says if the multiplier of your rate of return times the number of years is around 70, then that will roughly double your investment. So this was 7% rate of return at 10 years, which is 70. That means that 50,000 roughly doubles to 100,000. So that's just a quick shortcut. Why is that relevant? Let's talk about question number 2. So now you're going to place $60,000 in an investment account that yields 7% per year compounded annually. If you leave your investment in place for 10 years, how much can you expect to have at the end of the 10-year period? So just without using Excel, what do we expect this value to be? So $60,000 now, 7% per year, 10 years, rule of 70, yeah, $120,000. Okay. Now it's not going to be exactly that. We're going to do the exact calculation, but we can use that rule of thumb as a good approximation. So $60,000, that's our present value. So what are we calculating now? Future value. So let's go ahead and put in equals FV. It's our future value calculation. Now the inputs are going to be very similar. 7%. Number of periods is 10. Still no payment. We're not quite there yet. But we do need to specify a $60,000 present value. So that's our lump sum investment. And I put that negative again in there. Tells me that I can expect under those terms to get $118,000 roughly, which is pretty close to $120,000. So the rule of 70 still holds up. Now, just a quick question, personal curiosity. Anybody got $60,000 lying around? I didn't expect so. If you did, probably don't want to tell me. That's a good idea, okay? So we're going to assume that we don't have $60,000 lying around. So what is a better solution? We're going to make payments to an investment account of $100,000, sorry, $100,000 at the end of every month. Now I realize that sounds like a lot now. It's like I don't have $1,000 lying around, Dr. Barnes. We're talking about in the future when you have a job and you've got some security and you're saying, I'm going to invest very wisely in my early years because I don't want to be like Dr. Barnes and be old and decrepit and still teaching. Okay. I'm losing touch with the generation below me and losing that kind of touch. So yeah, gonna finance or frequently invest and retire early. That's going to be the goal there. So I think that's what FIRE stands for. I can't remember. So Let's go ahead and do some calculation here about what it is that we can do if we're going to invest $1,000 at the end of the month. So this is still a future value calculation, but our assumptions have changed. So we're going to do equals for future value. The rate is going to be 7%. However, you will notice that we're investing $1,000 at the end of every month, okay? And it's compounded monthly. So we need to change our terminology a little bit. We're going to do 7% divided by 12 because we want to know what the percentage is going to be on a monthly basis. And then number of periods, since we're doing this on a monthly basis, it's no longer 10 periods. It's now 10 times 12, 120. If you want to put in 10 times 12, that's fine. I'm assuming everybody can do that 10 times 12 math pretty easily. All right. Now we do need to put in a payment. So this is going to be $1,000, which I'm going to put that negative on there. And do we need to put in a present value here? No, because our present value is nothing. We don't have any investment at the beginning. So we're just going to be doing those payments. Now, there is a point here. You may actually be noticed. Like, Dr. Barnes, when do the payments take place? Do they take place at the end of the month or the beginning of the month? The answer is I'm going to default to the end of the month. I generally default to ordinary annuity in my calculations. You can make the adjustment here. How do we make that adjustment if you want to do it at the beginning of the month? We would put in 0 for present value, and then the type actually specifies a 0 or a 1. A 0 is going to be the end of the period, which is an ordinary annuity. A 1 is the annuity due, which is the beginning of the period. I'm not going to worry too much about that because it does complicate things. For right now, just assume that we're always defaulting to end of month payments. So we'd have $173,000. So a little bit of investment, take that. So I guess when you graduate, you have like maybe a $5,000 per month paycheck, take a quarter or 20% of that, invest now, and then you have a little bit of a nest egg in 10 years. By the way, those numbers become much larger if you invest over the long term. So I'm just curious. Let's just go ahead and take a look at this. Let's assume 7%, 12 periods, but let's do 480 months. That's 100 years. Anybody want to try to guess what this number is going to be? I don't know. I honestly don't know. I'm not doing this calculation. I'm going to put it right around 2.5 million. Okay, 2.5 million. Woo, it's close, 2.6 million. So yeah, that looks like a pretty good retirement account right there if you think about 40-year investments, okay? If you graduate at 22, 23 years old, retire at 62, 63, 2.5 or 2.6 million is probably, even with inflation, is going to be sufficient for what your purposes are going to be. So yeah, good to note there. All right, let's say you have the goal of accumulating $100,000 by making payments to an investment account at the end of every month for 10 years. So we're flipping things. Now we're saying we know our future value. What does our payment need to be? Well, the good news is we have a payment function. It's exactly what it sounds like, equals PMT. So it's saying so. So rate of return, 7%, still need to divide by 12 because we're doing it on a compounding monthly basis. Number of periods, 120, just like we did before. Present value is going to be 0 because we don't have any present value. We're starting with $0 in account. Our future value, our goal, is going to be $100,000. And again, we're just going to leave it at annuity due. How much do we have to pay in on a monthly basis if we wanted to get $100,000? Probably somewhere around 500 something, a little bit more than 500. Yeah, 577.75. Again, assuming 7% compounded monthly. It's a consistent rate. All right, last question in this area. Now that you've accumulated $100,000, you want to retire. Now, the very first thing I'm going to tell you, do not retire with only $100,000 in your savings account or your retirement account. That is bad news. I do not want anybody leaving here who says, well, Dr. Barnes said we could retire with $100,000. That is not what I'm saying, okay? Just a nice round number. It's just a nice round number, okay? Do not retire 100,000. I think the current estimates is that you probably want to be about around 1.4 million. With inflation, that's probably going to increase in your lifetime. So it's going to be that. So if you start planning now, you can make that number easily, but $100,000 is definitely not enough. Unless, of course, you live on very, very meager means, like you live on a tent on the side of the road and you have ramen every single day for your dinner. Even then, it might be a challenge. All right. So your plan is to withdraw $10,000 every year for the next 20 years, assuming a rate of return of 7%. Let's go ahead and use NPV and IRR to determine if the plan will work. Okay. So $100,000, $10,000 in the 20 years. Now, just mathematically speaking, this does not work if we do not think time value of money, because we've got a beginning value of $100,000. We're withdrawing a total of $200,000. But what we have on our side is we've got that time value of money. Anything that's left in that account will continue generating value. We'll continue generating value over time. So the question is 7% enough to cover that value that we need over a 20-year period. So let's go ahead and figure that out. So we're going to use equals NPV. We need to specify our rate of return, which is going to be 7%. And then after we hit that comma after 7%, what we're going to do is we're just going to highlight cell C28 through C48. And I set this series up specifically. So our beginning inflow is $100,000, and then we have periodic outflows annually of $10,000. And it says negative $5,551.54. What does that tell you? The plan will not work. The plan will not work. We are not generating enough of a return to cover 20 years. It was a bad plan anyway, but the plan, even as we have it set out, was not going to work. So presumably, if this number is 0, that tells us exactly that we've got a rate of return that covers our basis. Because it's negative, we're saying that the rate of return we need needs to be higher. Now, if this number is positive, that would tell us that we're generating a higher rate of return than we actually need. Let's go ahead and prove that using the IRR function, the internal rate of return function. This one's pretty easy. So we're going to go equals IRR, and then we're just going to highlight our values, the same values that we used before. Now, what did I say? If it's a negative value, then what's the IRR going to be? It's going to be higher than rate of return. So it's going to be something higher than 7%. And in fact, it is at 7.75%. Which now I'm curious. I've never done this in the class before, but if I net present value 7.75% over here in this function, we should come up close to 0. Yeah, $32.74. So now last year, you're going to be $32.74 short. Again, don't follow this retirement plan. Bad idea. Bad idea. But this kind of illustrates those concepts. All right. With that, let's move on to our AI discussion. So we're going to talk about some AI concerns very, very briefly. So what I would like for you to do, we're just going to take a couple of minutes to look at this, but I have a document on Brightspace. It's the AI accounting research example. Okay, it's in the content folder. And I want you to evaluate the content in this paper from a critical perspective of a skilled business student. So basically what I'm asking is I want you to look at this. This was an AI generated document. I want you to tell me, what are your thoughts on this particular document? All right, so I'm sure we have a chance to look over this. All right, and a chance to think about this. We've got a lot of very knowledgeable people about accounting and business in this room. Seems like a pretty good brief, doesn't it look? A good research piece. All right. So yeah, definitely have heard FIFO. FIFO. That, by the way, that's the name of Dr. Caden's dog. In case anybody wanted to know that information, they didn't name it Fido. They named it FIFO. Last in, first out, weighted average cost method, and market valuation method. All very, very relevant methods of inventory, and gave a lot of evidence and proof in support of that. So, has anybody got any objections to me including this information on the exam? So yes, I don't want more information on the exam, Dr. Barnes, but I need a tangible objection. Does anybody have any tangible objections to why I should not include this information on the exam? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Because I don't want it, Dr. Barnes. That's not a tangible objection. All right, so before I do this, I'm going to give you a little bit of a hint, okay? Let's harken back to 2000 or to 220, okay? To accounting 220. Everybody remember learning about FIFO? Okay, everybody feels pretty confident FIFO is a legitimate inventory method, right? What about LIFO? Do you remember LIFO being a legitimate inventory method? Yeah, it's legal in the United States at least, okay? It's not necessarily legal other places. What about weighted average cost? Yeah, that's something you learned back in 220. And the market valuation method, that's something you learned in 222, right? Everybody's starting to say, I don't remember learning that in 220. Do you know why? Because it's not a GAAP-approved method of inventory valuation. I made it up, all right? I actually didn't make it up. People have used that before. But so this brief was generated with the intention of misleading you into thinking that there were actually 4 methods of inventory valuation. There are only the 3 that we talked about. Now, there's other methods that are GAAP approved, but the 3 primary ones are the ones that we talked about. And I threw one on there to see if anybody would catch it. We're not putting this on the exam because it's complete and total hogwash, okay? AI made this up with a lot of nudging and prompting for me. It actually said, this is not a GAAP approved method. You cannot write a brief like this. I refused to do it. And I said, look, I'm using this for an AI example in class. You're going to have to do it. And it made up a really good citation. It says, look, J. Smith, Advanced Inventory Valuation Techniques, Journal of Accounting Innovations. Anybody go and look and see if there's a Journal of Accounting Innovations out there? I'll give you, I'll spoil it. There's not, okay? That's not an accredited research journal. This is something we've already talked about. This is a hallucination. Admittedly, this is a hallucination that I had to press the AI tool into doing, but this is not all that uncommon for things to happen like this, all right? So is everybody a little bit relieved that this is not going on the exam now? It says Dr. Barnes is testing on some stuff that's completely and totally total hogwash. The whole point of this, I want you to note, is if you use the AI tool for your 220 class, this would be one of those things that you could run the danger of. So you'll run into a brief like this, that, oh yeah, there's some professor at Truman State created this brief. Let me go ahead and reiterate this brief and this details for you. And you can rely on the Journal of Accounting Innovations to talk about advanced inventory evaluation techniques. So yeah, there's some ethical concerns with the use of AI tools. And some of these we've already talked about, but I want to drill a little bit down. We already know about hallucinations, which I'm going to talk a little bit about in more detail. But what are some things that we have to be concerned about? Well, remember before when we talked about Ethan Mollick's rules last week, one of the things I talked about is being the human in the loop. We have to have a level of not just expertise, but skepticism about what AI provides. Simply because if we don't, we end up with situations like that where there's citations that are complete and total garbage. Now, that sounds like, again, I know you're arguing saying, Dr. Barnes, you forced the AI tool to write that, and that's a true statement. But could this occur in reality? And the answer is yes. Let's talk about some of the concerns with respect to the AI concerns that we'd be aware of. The first one, we're going to be talking about biases. So we had our executive in residence a couple of years ago who was talking about the nature of AI, and he said AI tools have the ability to change the world, but an AI tool is only going to be as strong as the underlying algorithms that support it. Now, early versions of AI tools, the algorithms were developed by human interaction. One that occurred back in 2016 was something called the Tay AI, or it was a Twitter account called Tay Tweets. And if you read the description, it says, the official count of Microsoft's AI spam from the internet that's got zero chill. The more you talk, the smarter Tay gets. Boy, that doesn't sound like it could be problematic, huh? Does anybody know anything about what happened with Tay? So, what's that? Yes. Okay. So a lot of white nationalists went on to Tay tweets and started spewing Nazi rhetoric toward it. So then Tay started talking about how basically the white nationalist agenda, and basically started saying terrible things about minorities. And it was taken offline and never put back online. That was like a 12-hour, 24-hour experiment that went wrong. And we can't possibly replicate those results, can we? Like, we've learned enough. It's been 9 years. We can't possibly replicate that. Oh, wait a minute. It's exactly what happened with Grok AI as well. And the problem is that both of these had the fundamental problem of that the algorithms were being developed by solicited input. And so some of the input was genuine and people were trying to develop the AI tools in a productive way. Some of them were just saying, let's see if we can screw with this AI and get it to do terrible things. Grok did exactly the same thing that Tay did. After about 24 hours, it was spewing a lot of things. Now, to be fair, the Grok AI had a basic problem with it, is that the Twitter employees that were hired by Elon Musk to do it, they were told to make a more politically incorrect tool because there's a lot of political correctness in the current LLM structure. So he was trying to see if we could actually develop something that had a little bit more originality and a little bit more bias. And it went a little bit too well, depending on how your perspective was, a little bit too extreme. All right. So yeah, definitely biases are going to be implicit in AIs, and it doesn't need to be something as extreme as the biases that we're talking about here. The biases that we could be referring to could be very, very subtle and very, very distinct, something that we don't necessarily recognize or acknowledge, but do exist because the underlying algorithms are flawed. So take the AIs with a grain of salt, because they're going to be very, very effective and very creative, but they're not necessarily going to be immune to these biases. We also have something called ethics, okay? So ethics are a problem. So is anybody familiar with this image right over here on the left? Back in the Russian-Afghan war, back in the early 80s to late 80s, there was a lot of drama going around during the Russian invasion. About 2 million Afghans died during the war, and they were talking about the displacement of the Afghanis during that period. And there was a very famous National Geographic cover with the image of this girl right here, an Afghani girl. It's called the National Geographic Afghan Girl. And it's very, very striking because, obviously the color of her eyes and the dirt on her face. It took me a grand total of about 5 minutes to find this image right here, which is an AI generated image, exactly the one, exactly of this one. It's based on this one. Now, AI image generation is certainly problematic simply because it's going to be trained on existing images and existing pictures. There's a lot of problems, a lot of articulation about AI art scraping going on right now, about AI generated art is based on existing art, so it's going to replicate that very closely. Styles and motifs, the different aspects of art, and they're trying to figure out a way to block AI art from or AI tools from actually being able to read the art. And it's certainly problematic because if it's publicly posted, then it's going to be publicly available. Another one with ethics has to do with the type of cloning that can occur right here. So does everybody know this gentleman? Hopefully we haven't forgotten this gentleman here. This is an original image. There was a video of this, an original image of President Obama and the artificial image. Now, if I didn't have these little tags down here about original artificial, could you told me which one was artificially generated? Probably not. Probably not. So the video generation is very robust, and we know the image generation can just video generation is just a series of image generations. But what about the sound? Well, the sound very much sounded exactly like President Obama. Now, I will admit what I was hoping to do is I was hoping to come in and I was hoping to actually see if I could replicate my own voice, which I think actually has some benefits. It would prevent me from repeating the same stories and the same words all the time. Definitely eliminate my verbal pauses, which I have a lot of vocalized pauses. Slow me down a little bit because I talk really, really fast. But can anybody see some ethical dilemmas with being able to replicate voices? There's a lot of AI scams going on right now, phone scams, where people are hearing from their loved ones saying, "I'm in jail. I need you to send me a debit card, so I can pay the bail to get out of jail." If you hear something like that in your own voice, especially if you're an older person who's not savvy to what the scams are, which I have an 83-year-old mother, and I'm just terrified that she's going to do something like that. She's actually very, very sharp, but she does tend to think everything now is a scam because I've been so focused on her saying, yeah, don't take anything at face value. It's possibly a scam. And she's pretty good about picking those out. But what if she heard my voice on the other end and said, yeah, I'm in jail. I need you to send me a debit card with bail money to get out. Her first thought's going to be, oh, my baby's in jail. All right. Her 53-year-old baby is in jail. Yeah, that's what she's going to think. Yeah. So certainly problematic in that regard. And that's something that's only going to become more and more pronounced over time. Also, we have hallucinations. We just talked about a hallucination, but some of them are very simple and basic and straightforward. Like here's an example of one that my GTRA last year ran. So how many R's in the word raspberry? And Copilot said raspberry contains 2 R's, which we've already talked about the nature of that. Some of these are a little bit more subtle and subtle. Some of these are very profound. Has anybody taken Professor Templeton's class and heard about Mata versus Avionica? So if you're not familiar with this case, this is one of the earliest uses of ChatGPT for a legal brief. And I'm going to tell you right now, it did not go well. The lawyer basically did not have a lot of resources, said, this is not worth my time. I'm going to have ChatGPT develop the brief for me. Do you know what ChatGPT did? It developed a very, very professional looking brief with a lot of case citations that were completely made up. And the judge on the case started trying to look up the citations and could not find any of them. They sounded really, really good. They sounded like they were really, really legitimate, but none of the cases actually exist. And so the lawyer had to admit, yeah, I didn't actually do my due diligence. I didn't quality check this to make sure that's legitimate. How many people are going to be taking the capstone courses here in the next few years? There's a lot of temptation right there if you're taking the capstone course to use AI tools to make your writing really, really effective, right? So yeah, I'm going to say that there's probably some advantage in that. There's also the disadvantage of the fact that if you had a topic that's very exotic, the AI tools may come and say, we're going to give you as many sources you want, as many citations. If you want 100 citations, we'll give you 100 citations. And some number of those are probably not going to be legitimate citations because the tool is just trying to make you happy. It's just trying to do what you asked it to do. Probably the most frightening one. This is the one that affects this generation of students and something that you're probably going to be very concerned about. It has to do with redundancy. So the skill set of AI tools aligns significantly with most highly compensated, highly creative, and highly educated work. Now, when I talk about highly compensated, highly creative, and highly educated, which group of students at Truman State do you think that applies to most? It's the ones in this room. It's the ones in this room, okay? The career set of the people in this room are going to be more highly compensated and considered to be highly skilled than a lot of the others. Now, I'm not trying to dismiss other majors at Truman State, but I'm going to say that there's a compensation advantage for the business students in particular. So you're at risk of replacement by AI. In fact, if you look over here, we got financial examiners, actuaries, budget analysts, statisticians, credit analysts. There's also accountants and auditors, which makes me a little bit nervous because I'm the auditor. All of these are at risk for replacement in AI. There was actually a recent article by PwC saying that in the next 3 years they're going to contract their hiring. So for those of you who are accounting majors, that's cause for concern. Now, does that mean that you're not going to get a job? No, it means it's just going to be a more competitive market, but it's something to be very, very aware of. Now, I guess there is some good news because the lowest scoring replacement is dance. So if maybe you could provide like teaching versus via interpretive dance, that may be an out for me. Like if I could actually teach AIS through modern, and we were talking about jazz earlier. I did have some experience with jazz, but yeah, that may be a possibility. But for the most part, traditional mechanisms, traditional methods of learning, and the traditional methods, they're going to be at risk of being replaced by AI. Now, one thing that I think I've said before, and I want to reiterate, is that while outsourcing and AI tools do have a risk of replacing jobs, I do think that you're going to be at an advantage coming from a strong university, first of all, with a strong background. Plus, having the skills in how to use AI will be very beneficial in that regard. The quote that I've heard is that AI will not necessarily replace jobs, but people who can use AI will replace people who can't use AI. So this is one of the reasons we're focusing on this in this course. So the good news, as Moloch's last rule suggests, AI tools will continue to evolve and improve. Now, just a reminder, we talked about this last week with Moloch's rules. The last rule is this is the worst version of AI that you're going to use. It's a bit scary, but it is also very, very good time to be in this area because you're going to be on the ground floor with these changes that are moving forward. At some point in the future, detailed prompt engineering techniques will be unnecessary, but there's still going to be a need for a human in the loop. So your value is not going to be, can you use AI necessarily? The question is, can you scrutinize and can you evaluate AI for high quality content? And again, some of the things that I've already alluded to is the benefits of human AI partnerships are going to be far, far more vast than even just human partnerships or computer work on their own. So learning how to use these tools in the most effective manner and learning how to scrutinize them and using them to improve their quality is just going to provide benefits for you in the future. And with that, we've been to another week. We have chapter 9 on Monday, and then I will see you then. Yeah.